The moment the airport lounge fell silent, it felt as if the world itself had paused to take a breath. Rain hammered against the wide glass walls, flights blinked red with delays, and exhaustion hung thick in the air. In one quiet corner, a single father sat with his small daughter asleep against his chest, her tiny fingers curled into his worn jacket. Across from him, a sharply dressed CEO laughed softly, her eyes carrying the kind of confidence money buys. No one could have guessed that within minutes, one unexpected announcement would turn mockery into awe and rewrite how everyone in that room saw the man they had ignored. Before the story unfolds any further, take a moment. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that you never truly know someone's story by looking at them, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us what really matters. The single dad's name was Ethan, though no one bothered to ask. He had the look of someone permanently tired, the kind of exhaustion that sleep alone could never fix. His shoes were scuffed, his backpack frayed at the seams, and his posture carried the quiet humility of a man who had learned not to take up too much space. His daughter, Lily, was 5 years old, her breathing soft and uneven as she slept, unaware of the tension around them. Ethan had been up since before dawn, juggling connecting flights, cheap coffee, and the constant fear of missing the last opportunity he had worked toward for years. The CEO beside him was named Claire, a woman known in business magazines for her ruthless efficiency and sharp tongue. She had just closed a billion-dollar merger and was on her way to a conference where her success would be celebrated again. Her tailored suit looked untouched by travel, her phone never left her hand, and her impatience grew with every announcement of delays. When she glanced at Ethan, it was with mild irritation, as though his presence somehow inconvenienced her carefully controlled world. She noticed his clothes, his child, his silence, and assumed she knew everything there was to know. Ethan felt her gaze and shifted uncomfortably, adjusting Lily so she wouldn't wake. Years ago, he might have lifted his chin, might have explained himself, might have defended his worth. But life had taught him differently. Since his wife had died suddenly, since hospital bills and grief had hollowed him out, he had learned that silence was often safer. He was there because he had to be, because a letter stamped with urgency had summoned him across the country for something he still wasn't sure would change his life or break it completely. The lounge buzzed with frustration as the storm worsened. People complained loudly, demanded answers, checked watches that cost more than Ethan's monthly rent. Claire muttered comments under her breath about inefficiency and wasted time, occasionally glancing at Ethan as though he embodied everything she despised about inconvenience. To her, he looked like a man who didn't belong in a premium lounge, someone who must have slipped through the cracks of privilege. She smirked once, shaking her head, convinced that discipline and intelligence always showed on the surface. What Claire couldn't see were Ethan's hands, scarred and steady, the hands of someone who had once held control panels at 30,000 feet. She couldn't see the quiet focus behind his eyes, or the memories he kept carefully folded away so they wouldn't spill out in moments like this. She didn't know that he had once worn a flight suit instead of a jacket, or that his name had once echoed with respect over secure radio channels. All she saw was a tired single dad, and she judged him accordingly. The announcement came without warning, cutting through the noise like a blade. The intercom crackled, and the voice that followed carried urgency, authority, and a trace of fear. The airport was facing an emergency. A private jet on the tarmac had lost its pilot to a sudden medical crisis. The co-pilot was inexperienced, the weather was deteriorating, and there was no time to wait for a replacement. The voice asked if there were any certified fighter pilots or military-trained aviators in the terminal who could assist immediately. A ripple of confusion spread through the lounge. People looked around, some nervous, some curious, some amused as if it were a strange joke. Claire laughed lightly at first, shaking her head at the absurdity of it all. Surely, she thought, someone qualified would step forward, someone in uniform, someone who looked the part. Her gaze flicked briefly to Ethan, and she dismissed the thought instantly, her smile tightening. Ethan felt Lily stir against him as the words sank in. His heart began to pound, not with fear, but with a familiar clarity. This was the world he had once lived in, the world he had left behind when responsibility and loss demanded it. He had promised himself that part of his life was over, that being a father came first, always. But in that moment, he also knew what was at stake. Lives depended on skill, not appearances. He gently shifted Lily, whispering reassurance, and stood. The movement was small, almost invisible, but it drew attention. People turned, surprised to see the quiet man rise. Claire's amusement faded, replaced by disbelief. Ethan stepped forward, his voice calm, his posture suddenly different, grounded, assured. He identified himself, explained his background, his years of service, the thousands of hours logged in conditions far worse than this storm. Each word landed heavily, reshaping the room's perception in real time. Security personnel moved quickly, verifying credentials, urgency overriding skepticism. Claire watched as the staff's demeanor changed completely, their respect immediate and unquestioning. The single dad she had mocked was suddenly the most important person in the building. Shame crept into her chest, hot and unfamiliar, as she realized how wrong she had been. Ethan knelt briefly to Lily, promising he would be back, asking a kind stranger to watch over her for a few minutes. His voice remained steady, but inside, emotion churned. He wasn't just stepping into a cockpit, he was stepping back into a part of himself he had buried to survive. As he disappeared down the corridor, the lounge fell silent again, this time with awe. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The storm raged on, screens flickered, and news spread quickly of what was happening outside. Claire sat frozen, her phone forgotten, replaying every dismissive thought she had entertained. For the first time in years, her confidence cracked, replaced by humility. She realized that success had narrowed her vision, had taught her to measure worth by appearances and titles alone. When the announcement finally came that the jet had landed safely, guided by steady hands through chaos, the room erupted. Applause broke out, strangers hugging, relief washing over everyone like sunlight after rain. Claire felt tears sting her eyes, unexpected and unstoppable. She clapped harder than anyone, her heart heavy with gratitude and regret. Ethan returned quietly, as he had left, his jacket damp, his expression composed. Lily ran to him, clinging tightly, and he held her as though grounding himself back in the present. The crowd parted instinctively, respect radiating toward him. Claire stood, unsure, humbled, and for once, speechless. She didn't offer excuses. She didn't need to. The lesson had carved itself deep enough. As Ethan sat back down, the world felt different. Not because he had saved the day, but because he had been seen, truly seen, if only for a moment. He had been reminded that the parts of himself he thought were lost still mattered, that his past sacrifices held meaning beyond survival. Lily looked up at him with pure trust, and he knew that whatever came next, he was enough. If this story has touched your heart so far, if it has reminded you to look again at the people you might overlook, please take a moment near the end to like the video, share it, and subscribe. Your support helps keep stories like this alive. Just before we close, here's a special request. Please comment below with the word, respect, if you believe that every person carries a story worth honoring. As the storm cleared and flights resumed, the airport returned to its usual rhythm. But something had shifted, quietly, invisibly. Claire boarded her flight changed, carrying a lesson no boardroom could teach. Ethan walked toward his gate with Lily's hand in his, lighter than he had felt in years. The world hadn't suddenly become fair or easy, but it had offered a moment of truth. And sometimes, one moment is enough to remind us who we are, and who we can choose to be.